Liberals descend on the City of Champions as questions emerge about Mark Carney's plans for EVs and fighting climate change. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Deeper than the headlines.
The answers you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
The federal political scene shifts to Edmonton for the next few days. That's where the Liberal team is assembling to talk shop ahead of next week's resumption of Parliament. Prime Minister Mark Carney is expected to arrive in his adopted hometown later today. Carney spent some time yesterday in Atlantic Canada, in St. John's, Newfoundland, announcing an $80 million aid package for companies impacted by tariffs. But at least one news reporter pointed out that in the grand scheme of things, $80 million is not a lot of money when it's spread across 4 provinces and thousands of businesses. Mark Carney suggested that's Atlantic Canada's fair share from this particular program, but more help could be available.
Part of the way we allocate, look, $1 billion is a lot of money. The overall format, $1 billion is a lot of money. And what we're allocating here is bigger than the relative share of population, the relative share of GDP of the overall Canadian economy, allocated that way. The second is it's channeled, as I said, through ACOA, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, and it's one of multiple projects or policies, initiatives that's channeled through ACOA. And then on top of that, we have the Business Development Bank programs as well. On top of that, we have various liquidity facilities that are available as well.
Well, the Prime Minister was in St. John's announcing $80 million in tariff relief for all of Atlantic Canada. The Industry Minister, Melanie Joly, was in Montreal, saying Quebec's aluminum sector is in line for hundreds of millions of dollars in financial aid from Ottawa.
The Quebec aluminum sector will get its fair share. Let's go back. Okay, the Quebec aluminum sector will get its fair share, and we believe that with the projects that are being discussed right now with Alcoa, with Rio Tinto, and with Alouette, it's hundreds of millions of dollars. So obviously I can't go into the details because we have to negotiate, but the goal is to continue to be at the forefront of the aluminum sector worldwide. Because we have to remember that ultimately aluminum is a commodity, and the aluminum sector is competing with different aluminums around the world, including from the UAE, and the Gulf sector, and also there's Russian aluminum, which right now is banned from coming to Western countries because part of our sanctions with Ukraine.
In the lead up to next week's fall session of Parliament, the Carney government is coming under scrutiny for some of its environmental policies. Just hours after becoming Prime Minister, after winning the Liberal leadership race, Mark Carney ended the consumer carbon tax. Now he's putting the EV sales mandate under review. Clean fuel regulations could get a rewrite. And he's not being clear about where he stands on Canada even meeting its long-held targets for cutting greenhouse gas emissions. The Prime Minister is now talking about making Canada more carbon competitive and suggested all of the previous government's environmental policies will get a second look.
Using this as an opportunity as part of a broader strategy on climate competitiveness to look at all our measures to help get greenhouse gases down, as I said a moment ago in French, greenhouse gases down in the key sectors, as well as across the economy. And we'll look at the interaction between the EV mandate, our clean fuel standards, our investment tax credits, our trade policy, all of those elements, because what this government is focused on is absolutely results. Not saying something's going to happen at a certain time, but giving workers and businesses the tools to make it happen.
The previous Trudeau government made massive investments in the EV sector in this country, totaling more than $50 billion. Some of those projects are still moving ahead, but some have failed, such as the $7 billion dream of a battery factory in Quebec called Northvolt. That company went bust. But Industry Minister Melanie Joly says the federal government is still committed to the EV sector in Canada.
We want to build more EVs in Canada. We need to, because we know that's where basically the world is heading. And we want to make sure that we are able to compete with also Chinese EVs. And so that's why we're taking 2 months to study what we can do to build more EVs in Canada, to also to import from the EU or from South Korea or Japan EVs here in Canada to get back to that 20%. And to make sure we're competitive, because we know the world is going there. So rather than scrapping the entire EV mandates, rather than like the Conservative wants us to do, which is to let go all our objectives to counter impacts of climate change, we need to make sure we're doing both. And so yes, we'll follow our goals of our targets, and at the same time what we'll do is we'll have an industrial strategy that makes sense and that we can keep the jobs in Cambridge, in Alliston, in Hamilton, in Brampton, which are all now at stake.
There's been no indication so far the Carney government is about to change course on tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. The Trudeau government put a 100% tariff on those vehicles, and China responded by putting tariffs on Canadian canola, pork, and seafood. And here is where there is some common ground between the Conservatives and the Liberals. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre doesn't think Chinese-made EVs should be allowed in Canada either.
No, I don't believe that is the right way to go. I think that, first of all, China wants these electric vehicles to be roving surveillance operations on our streets. And in 10 years, God forbid, there's a conflict, and then there's millions of those vehicles surveilling our population in our streets. That would be a strategic problem for our country. So I respect Scott Moe. He's a great premier. I just respectfully disagree with this point. What I would do instead is I would cancel the $1 billion loan the Liberals are giving under Mark Carney to buy Chinese-made ships. I would say to the dictators in Beijing, you are not going to be selling $1 billion of ships to our country when you are unlawfully and unfairly targeting our canola producers with tariffs.
With less than a week to go before MPs return to Ottawa, some of the polling firms are showing the political horse race has tightened in recent weeks. Abacus data says the Liberals lead the Conservatives by just 3 points. Main Street Research says the Liberal lead is down to 2 points. Angus Reid says the Conservatives lead the Liberals by 2 points. In August, most of the polls show the Liberals enjoying a double-digit lead over the Conservatives. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
On News Radio.
He's with us every Tuesday to talk about some of the big issues in our world. Professor Ian Lee is with the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. Welcome back.
Good afternoon, Rob, and it's always my pleasure to speak with you.
Okay, so we're going to play a couple of clips here about Canadian companies trying to do business in the United States with the Trump administration. So the first clip is Steve Bannon, the well-known MAGA insider. This was a comment that he made shortly after Donald Trump won the election for the second time, saying the United States is behind the golden door and we shouldn't let other countries come in here for free. Let's roll the tape on that, please.
America's behind the golden door, okay? And this market's the most robust, lucrative market in the world, and we shouldn't just let people have access. We shouldn't let foreigners have access to this market and to the American people and American citizens for free. So I think I would love to see something that set up an external revenue service in Treasury that eventually took the burden off people on internal revenue service. There's no reason the American people, American corporations, even the donor class has to pay for everything.
Okay. The United States is the golden door. Behind the golden door, another country shouldn't come in here for free. This is Mark Carney. This is from Friday. Prime Minister Mark Carney suggesting that because of the Trump policies, Canada has to buy access to the U.S. economy. Roll that.
The U.S. tariff rate is now the highest it has been since the Great Depression in the 1930s. And these tariffs are being applied to all countries on nearly all goods. And the changes in U.S. policy go beyond tariffs. Countries now must, in effect, buy access to the world's largest economy through investments, through unilateral trade liberalization. and policy changes in their home markets.
To me, those two clips sound the same. Do we have to now buy access to the U.S. economy? Do Canadian companies, the Canadian government need to buy access to the U.S. economy? What do you think, Professor?
Rob, I'm just so frustrated. I've been saying this for years, literally years. And I was saying it in January that we must open up those industries where we prohibit or limit American access. And it's been on the list of the U.S. trade rep literally from the Clinton years to now. That's a third of a century. I received emails in January from some Canadians across the country accusing me of being a traitor for saying this and telling me I should move to the States if I loved America so much. And all I said was, we're going to have to open up those markets if we want access to their markets. Now, to your question, because you're really saying, what is Carney saying? What Carney's doing, in my judgment, is he's reconceptualizing or rebranding what I said. I said you just got to compromise and open them up. And I was, I've already said I was being accused of all kinds of terrible things. Why do we do that if we're not getting anything from Trump? Was the classic argument. We got to punish him. What Carney's doing is he's rebranding what I said in more palatable terms. He's turning it into a market idea, a market transaction idea. If we want access to their markets, we got to pay a price. Well, that's all I was saying. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, everybody. We've got to walk away. He even talked about internal trade liberalization. In that speech you just played, the key word was including trade internal, he said. That means us. Trade liberalization. That's code talk for getting rid of supply management, everybody. That is code talk for opening up the telecom so American phone companies like Verizon and AT&T can come into Canada. That's code talk for opening up the airlines. That's code talk for taking off the restrictions on American banks coming into Canada. So what he's saying, and I've been saying this for years, this was coming because and this is the whole essence of Trump. Trump said countries around the world demand complete and open access to our markets in the States, says Trump, but then they turn around and restrict access to their markets from American companies. And he said that's not going to happen anymore. So that's what's happening before our eyes. We are still a lot of Canadians are still, because they don't get it. Sorry, don't get it. If we want to play in that market, the largest economy on planet Earth, 30 trillion, we're going to have to pay a price. And that price is we've got to open up our markets.
Right. If we want to get behind the golden door.
If we want to get into the go through the golden door.
If
we want to go through the golden door. That's right.
Yeah. Did you ever think you'd be living in a world where Steve Bannon and Mark Carney sound so much the same, but they sound the same to me? That sounds exactly the same to me. Yeah.
Stunning.
Okay.
Stunning. Absolutely.
Look, I mean, a huge deal involving a Canadian company today. I mean, it's the biggest mining announcement merger in a decade. It involves the big Canadian company out of Vancouver, Teck Resources. I'm sure the government is going to give it a good long look. I want your take on this one when we come back. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
Okay, so we're back with Professor Ian Lee with the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University. So massive merger announced in the mining sector today involving a Canadian company. This is a $50 billion US deal. So it involves Teck Resources, which is based in Vancouver. It's being described as a merger of equals with a UK-based company, big mining company, Anglo American. This creates the world's fifth largest copper producer. The operational headquarters will be in Vancouver, but it's going to raise concerns that we've heard before, especially in the mining sector. This is the hollowing out of corporate Canada. And you look at all the great mining companies in Canada that have been taken over. Noranda merged with Falconbridge. They were both bought by Xstrata. Glencore took over Xstrata. Inco taken over by Vale of Brazil. Alcan taken over by Rio Tinto. Viterra taken over by Glencore. So we keep hearing from the Carney government, Canada needs to chart its own course. What do you think about this deal? You think the government will give this the go-ahead? What do you think?
I hope it does.
Why?
And I hope we can finally put to bed this idea that it's important who owns a particular company. I've been debating this for 35 years in the university. Oh, we've got to own our airlines. We can't allow Air Canada to be bought by a foreign airline. We'll lose our identity. This is garbage. I've flown around the world. I've flown on Aeroflot. They never turned me into Russian. I've flown on Lufthansa many times. Don't speak a word of Russian. I just bought a Hyundai, a used Hyundai. Do I speak Korean? Am I going to become Korean? Of course not. Millions of Canadians go to Walmart. Does that turn them into Americans? Some people own John Deere tractors. Do they become American because they're riding around cutting their grass on a John Deere? So what I'm trying to say, Rob, is it doesn't matter. Number one, we have always imported foreign capital into Canada from even before Canada existed. Why? Because we were never big enough to save up enough enough capital investment. Investment capital is from savings. I'm not trying to get into economics here, but the national savings is what drives or funds investment. So we've always been a net importer of foreign direct investment. Okay, that's how we built the CPR. And so the critical question, Rob, is not who owns it. Canada does not lose, no country, no sovereign country, loses its ability to regulate any company or any industry it's in. So the key thing is not who owns the company, it's what are they going to do? Are they going to invest and obey the laws of the country? And so we regulate. We have laws that regulate mining. We have laws that regulate oil and gas and pipelines, et cetera. So the ownership is irrelevant. This is the mentality. It's a very bad illness. It's existed at the core of the NDP and the left side of the Liberal Party. Sorry for being so blunt here, everybody. But it has existed. It's driven out foreign capital, and it's driven down our standard of living.
Right.
We are more
but do we not
impoverished
want
because of
these?
this.
Do we not want these Canadian champions? Do we not? Do you not lament the fact that there's no more Noranda or Falconbridge or Inco anymore? No.
Who cares?
Who cares?
Who
Really?
cares? Rob, what's important is not whether the person was born by sheer accident because their mom and dad had sex in Manitoba and got pregnant in Manitoba, and that somehow determines my life. Come on. It's whether the company invests in our country or not. And I don't care if they're foreign or domestic, they're still subject to the laws of our country. Parliament is supreme. If we don't like what a company is doing in the copper mining industry, well, then we change the laws. That's what we do. The ownership is not relevant. First off, 3/4 of our retailing sector has been foreign-owned forever. Are we less Canadian because we go to Starbucks, which is a foreign-owned company, or you buy a Tesla? I mean, the whole auto industry is foreign-owned. Anybody who says we've got a Canadian-owned auto industry doesn't know what they're talking about. GM is American. So is Ford. So is Chrysler. So is Honda. So is Toyota. Who cares? We want them to invest here and hire Canadians.
Okay. Anglo Tech. It's going to be called Anglo Tech if the deal goes through. All right.
I'm happy. I'm going to be very happy.
Big deal. $50 billion US. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Professor Ian Lee. Never shy to share his opinions. From the Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, our Newsday political panel up next on News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
It is time for our Tuesday Newsday political panel. Ashton Arsenault is with me today, partner at Crestview Strategy. Welcome back, Ashton. Great to hear from you again.
Good to be here, Rob.
And Julia Parsons is back as well from Hill and Knowlton. Great to hear from you, Julia. Great to hear from you today. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Rob.
I want to talk about what kind of climate warrior is Mark Carney? That's the question. Mark Carney killed the carbon tax. It's Mark Carney who is reviewing the EV sales mandate. It's Mark Carney who says we're going to change the fuel regulations, clean fuel regulations. It's Mark Carney who won't commit to Canada's long-held, spanning both Conservative and Liberal governments, targets for greenhouse gas emissions. His government might approve an oil pipeline to British Columbia. Mark Carney was the climate envoy of the United Nations. What do you think, Julia, of this backsliding on climate policy from former UN climate envoy, Prime Minister Mark Carney?
Well, Rob, your question really makes me wonder. How is the more progressive side of the Liberal Party and its supporters, those who are, especially concerned with climate change, how are they feeling right now? I think you would find, candidly, that many conservatives right now, while not totally satisfied with the government, they are happy to see that the Prime Minister is moving to, has axed the carbon tax to set the stage for major energy projects. But let's not forget that it was, maybe a year ago that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government were fiercely defending those policies. So what does it mean for your listeners as we return to Parliament? Well, I think we've just heard some really interesting news in recent days that Liberal MPs have formed an environmental caucus. They want a stronger focus on climate of them. And what I'm going to be watching for as Parliament gets started back here in Ottawa next week is, with that effort, are we going to see any of these Liberal MPs speak out or challenge the government on the climate policies? Or is the Prime Minister going to make some pivots and concessions to those who are concerned?
What do you think about because there will be some who see this as backsliding on climate policy, Ashton. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually on the same wavelength as Julia, and I'll have to give credit where it's due on this one simply because, the Prime Minister has addressed or is in the process of addressing Trudeau era ideological policies that have made Canada less competitive and has robbed people of a lot of money with very little payoff. And I'll double down and say, I hope the government goes further. They should look at scrapping the EV mandate altogether because it's absurd. They should build pipelines because it will benefit Canadians. They should also probably consider repealing the industrial price on carbon, as Poilievre said he would do, and reopen the clean electricity regulations, which have been a total disaster. Ask anyone in industry about that. And look, I think a good deal of this is common sense, but at the same time, to Julia's point, we are hearing whispers of discontent within the Liberal caucus, those that are having difficulty stomaching perhaps these backslides, to use your words, Rob. So I'll be interested to see if Carney can keep a lid on it. But for me, at the end of the day, look, it'll be up to Canadians to decide if we want, a government that is more about virtue signaling or one that is, more aligned with building a good economy.
I should point out, there was a major report in the Globe and Mail a few days ago that outlined the list that everyone is waiting to see, the list of projects in the national interest. And according to the report in the Globe and Mail, 14 of them are energy projects in Western Canada. They're not all having to do with fossil fuels. Some of them are carbon capture and storage. Others have to do with electricity generation and transmission, but at least two of them were LNG projects for the West Coast. What's being called Northern Gateway 2.0, that would go from northern Alberta to northern British Columbia, Prince Rupert, and the other one is in Atlantic Canada, offshore oil and gas called Bay du Nord. But that's 4 projects specifically dealing with fossil fuels. And I just can't help but wonder, what must Mr. Guilbeault think of all of this? Stephen Guilbeault. I remember there were all kinds of rumors, Julia, if the Liberals ever got rid of the carbon tax, Stephen Guilbeault was going to walk out on the Liberals. What do you think was going on in Mr. Guilbeault's world right now?
Well, that certainly didn't happen. So I guess we'll have to stay tuned to see if there's any movement with this new environmental caucus. But just to your point there, Rob, I think one thing that we are seeing is this is a different flavor of government than what we had seen under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The things that you mentioned, the movement, while we're still waiting to see what the list looks like in its entirety, and what the government is going to do as a tangible next step, these are the getting major nation building projects done is something that the Prime Minister committed to in the last election. So I think all of those within the government side, it shouldn't be all that shocking that some of these things are what they're looking at.
Okay. What do you think is going on in Mr. Guilbeault's world right now? Does he feel at home? I wonder how much he feels at home in this version of the Liberal Party. What do you think, Ashton?
Look, I think a $250,000 salary, a private driver, and a couple of swanky offices will make anybody do a double take.
Okay.
I don't necessarily take Stephen Guilbeault at his word. I never have, and the door is pretty close to him should he want to walk through it. At the same time, again, I'm agreeing with Julia. The easiest way you can boil this down is imagine having a gold mine in your backyard and all you have to do is move a little earth to get to all of the gold. That's been the situation in this country for a long time. The previous government ignored it for a decade. This government, at least on paper right now, seems to be going the other way, which I think is a good thing for all of us.
Okay, when we come back, what does the future look like for the expansion of pharmacare? Is this another Trudeau-era policy, Liberal NDP policy, that is going to wither and die? We'll be right back. I'm Rob Snow. It's our Tuesday Newsday political panel here on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now you know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
With our Tuesday Newsday political panel, Ashton Arsenault is here from Crestview Strategy, Julia Parsons with Hill and Knowlton. What does the expansion of pharmacare look like? Is this another Liberal NDP policy that is going to wither on the vine? I mean, the end goal of this, I remember this was part of the language from Mark Holland, who was the health minister at the time, the former Liberal MP. The end goal was the operation and financing of national universal single payer pharmacare in Canada. And I'm just wondering, given what we're reading, is that dead now? What do you think, Ashton? What's going on with the pharmacare? Is that over now?
I think in many ways the jury's probably still out on the efficacy of the government-led sort of pharmacare experience in Canada. There are, a few deals in place with provinces already. Many provinces remain holdouts. And at the end of the day, if a province isn't buying what the federal government is selling, it's probably not going to work. So, I look at it this way. With the NDP being essentially more irrelevant than a $2 bill, I'm not really sure what the payoff would be for the Carney government to force this on the other provinces. And, he said he would protect what they've already agreed to, but it's very clear that this is no longer a government priority. And you go back in time, this one was always kind of a challenge. Like, many Canadians are already covered, be it through work or another source. And the entire time it was being rolled out, it just felt forced. Like, those involved were simply going through the motions because they had to. And so, like, where I'm at, if it isn't dead, it's on life support.
It's not dead, it's on life support. What do you think the future looks like for an expansion of pharmacare? Julia, what do you think?
Well, it certainly doesn't seem to be the top priority of the government. But you know what, Rob? I want to talk to you about something just a little bit more technical here, but I think it's something to watch, and it's something your listeners might not know. So the pharmacare bill that the government passed with the NDP, it mandated some reporting that's actually going to come out this fall on pharmacare. The government will receive a report by the committee of experts on, that universal national pharmacare language that you mentioned, Rob. That report is coming out, and that is due by, I believe, October 10th. So what I'm really going to be watching for is when the government receives that report, which they say they are going to table in Parliament, I think it'll be interesting to see what does that report say and how does the government frame the future of pharmacare, because that's really the next hallmark of when they're going to need to talk about it and respond. And this is especially interesting in the context of, the government saying they're going to have an October budget. So I'll be watching to see what the report says and how the government says they're going to go forward.
Yeah. Do you agree with Ashton? Ashton called it seemed to come across as forced. That was always my kind of reading of it too. I more or less agree with Ashton. Are there people who are struggling to afford prescription medications because of their social circumstance, being low income, not having a benefits plan? Sure. Not being on a parent's benefits plan? Absolutely. The working poor especially. So if we're going to have a pharmacare program, why don't we have a pharmacare program that helps those people? What essentially the government wanted to do was take over the entire pharmacy industry, if you will, in Canada. Ontario teachers have a great pharmacare plan. They don't need pharmacare. Public servants in Ottawa that have great prescription coverage. They don't need the government to be paying once more for their prescription medications. Provincial governments have their own programs exactly like this that cover seniors and low income people on social assistance. It seemed to be solving a problem that, yes, exists, but not to the extent that the proponents made it out to be, Julia. That was kind of my always interpretation of it. What do you think?
Well, you know what? I'm actually, I'll say something personal here. I'm a type 1 diabetic myself, and I have coverage. So I'm one of those people who are covered already by my program. And I think that's been the perennial question is what about those who already have coverage? Should the government be involved in that conversation? And that's something that I think we're waiting to hear from the government, where they see the future. And is it the national pharmacare that's universal? Is that what they're aiming towards? I haven't their priority right now. But you're certainly right that some folks have been asking that same question.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll be right back. We want to talk about Pierre Poilievre when we come back. Still focused on many of the same issues that he concentrated on during the election. Today, he was in Brampton announcing a housing affordability program that sounded, well, basically the mirror image of what he was running on during the election campaign, but also other affordability measures, gas prices, carbon tax 2.0, crime, harder edge on immigration than maybe before. We'll talk about what Pierre Poilievre is talking about and whether he's hitting on the right issues when we return on our Newsday political panel. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
House of Commons gets back into action on Monday. I'm here with Ashton, Arsenault, and Julia Parsons. We're talking about politics, of course. I find Pierre Poilievre is focused on many of the same issues that he talked about during the election campaign: housing affordability, gas prices, crime. His tone on immigration certainly has a harder edge than before, I think. But what do you think about the issues that are top of mind for the opposition leader, Julia?
Yeah, it's a good question. And look, on Trump and tariffs, I think the last election clearly demonstrated, regardless of what political stripe that you're from, that PM Carney had a bit of an edge on the Conservatives on that file. We saw that reflected in the polls and in voter intention. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other issues that do have an edge for the Conservatives. And it seems to me that's where the focus is really placed on for the Conservatives. You're right to mention one of the core issues that they are talking about right now is immigration. I noted that they had said recently they would scrap the temporary foreign worker program, for example, and also seeing a lot more on crime and housing. Even I saw today they're out on housing. So what this indicates to me as the House is set to return is these policy areas are ones that the Conservatives view the government is not as focused on and that they may be a bit more vulnerable on. What I think is going to be really important when we get back in Ottawa, remember that Pierre Poilievre will return to Parliament. He had, unfortunately not been in Parliament last couple of months due to him not securing his seat. So what will be interesting to see is how does the Prime Minister respond when Pierre is back in the House and he's asking these tough questions? I don't think we saw a lot of their back and forth ahead of the election or even, after the election. So I'll be watching to see how the Prime Minister responds now that we're past an election and how he responds specifically on those issues where the Conservatives are placing more of their attention.
Okay. What do you think about the issues that are top of mind for Pierre Poilievre that he's really hammering away on, Ashton?
Yeah, look, I think he's great at agitating, and I think his focus is a reflection of the issues Canadians are latching onto at the moment. And, as an aside on trade, I think the Prime Minister has played his base and supporters like a fiddle on the trade front. Like the elbows are on the floor. That'll be for him to explain. He doesn't seem to be wearing it at this point. But I think Poilievre's going to have some rather clear focus in the fall session. And I'm sure he'll be approaching it with a lot of vigor now that he can stand directly across from the Prime Minister in the House. And yeah, he is going to attack on the cost of living. It's not great. He's going to attack on terrible job numbers that we've recently seen, and he should hammer away on crime. Like, there are horrible stories about home invasions and rape and repeat offenders hurting people again and again and again. And I think that's actually starting to crystallize public opinion. And yeah, to Julie's point on immigration, there has been absolutely no solution on this front by the government. And in fact, they've already overextended themselves for this year. So they should have to answer for that. And I think Canadians will care about those issues for sure.
Okay. Great to hear from both of you today. I really enjoyed our time and our discussion. We'll speak soon. All the best.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, Julia.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Julia Parsons, 7 years on Parliament Hill. She's with Hill and Knowlton these days. Ashton Arsenault is partner at Crestview Strategy in Ottawa today. Talkback is coming up right after the news. And a brand new topic today. We're going to talk about the environment and the economy. And whether you think the federal government, say under Mr. Trudeau, had been too focused on fighting climate change and environmental issues and not focused enough on growing the economy, especially the natural resources sector. And if climate policies are rolled back, and they're being rolled back, and natural resources projects are being put on the fast track, because it appears they are, do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing for Canada? I'm going to kick that around for a couple of hours. When we come back on Talkback, right after the latest breaking news, 1-833-668-2577, 1-833-668-2577 to have your say on Talkback today. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. Big one today. The environment and the economy. The environment and the economy. Do you think the federal government has been too focused on fighting climate change? Not focused enough on economic growth, economic opportunities, especially in the natural resources sector? Yes or no? If climate policies are rolled back and natural resources projects are put on the fast track, what would you think of that? Would that be good for Canada? Bad for Canada? 1-833-668-2577. Let's talk about the environment and the economy. The reason we want to talk about this today is because there is some belief that there is a shift happening in Canada right now. The previous Liberal government of Justin Trudeau had a whole range of policies and regulations that it insisted were vital in the fight against climate change, the greatest fight of our lives. Emissions reduction plans, net zero emissions by 2050, the carbon tax, oil and gas emissions cap, clean electricity regulations, EV sales mandate, massive investments in the EV sector, $50 billion plus, clean fuel regulations, just transition legislation, West Coast tanker ban, the Impact Assessment Act, known as the No Pipelines Bill. I mean, it was years and years, one after another, 10 years of legislation and regulation, all done according to the previous Liberal governments and the previous Prime Minister, because we had to fight climate change to keep the world from warming any more than 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. I think some of you might remember, I certainly remember, back in 2019, Greta Thunberg came to Canada, came to Montreal for a climate strike march. You remember that? She was, of course, the darling of the global environmental movement at the time, and the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, went there, had a private meeting with her just 6 years ago. Mr. Trudeau also used to say the environment and the economy go hand in hand. But some Canadians felt as though the policy direction was just too focused on the environment, not focused enough on the economy, economic growth, job creation. And there's a feeling now that is changing. that while we still have a Liberal government, we have this new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. And he sounds as though he has different plans than Justin Trudeau had. Mr. Carney, despite being an ardent supporter of carbon taxes for many years, set the carbon tax to zero, basically killed the carbon tax. First thing he did when he became Prime Minister after winning the Liberal leadership race. Ended the consumer carbon tax. Now he's putting the EV sales mandate under review. Clean fuel regulations coming under review. And asked about whether Canada would meet its long-standing targets for cutting greenhouse gas emissions, he was non-committal, saying, essentially, we're not going to make targets for the sake of making targets. At the same time, the Globe and Mail newspaper managed to get its hands on a list of projects being considered by this new National Projects Office, this so-called projects in the national interest. 32 of them, 14 of them various energy projects in Western Canada. 2 LNG projects for the West Coast, Northwest Coast oil pipeline, what some call Northern Gateway 2.0, and an oil and gas drilling project for Newfoundland and Labrador called Bay du Nord. Offshore oil and gas, Newfoundland and Labrador, all the environmental groups in the country are opposed to that project. 8 mining projects, copper, gold, uranium, nickel, rare earth elements, Ring of Fire, Northern Ontario. So think about this and share your thoughts at 1-833-668-2577. We have gone from a prime minister leading a government who used to say, we can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow, but we need to phase them out. Justin Trudeau said that. We have it on tape. In fact, let's play the tape, the short clip here. Justin Trudeau in Peterborough in 2017 on the oil sands. Roll the tape on that.
We can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow. We need to phase them out. We need to manage the transition off of our dependence on fossil fuels. That is going to take time. And in the meantime, we have to manage that transition.
We've gone from that to a prime minister who is now looking at approving, putting on the fast track at least 8 mining projects and more than a dozen energy projects in Western Canada, including an oil pipeline. So there's this thinking the pendulum is swinging back, maybe too far. That under Mr. Trudeau, things were too tilted toward the environment, fighting climate change, and that came at the expense of our economy. Now, natural resources projects are back in favor, maybe even on the fast track. A lot of environmental policies are coming under review or being canceled. The environmental movement in this country, we'll speak to 2 leaders in that movement tomorrow. They will almost certainly be disappointed in what they are hearing. And they will say the threat to humanity from climate change is as great as it has ever been. We want to know what you think about this, what you're hearing from the Carney government on the environment and the economy. Do you think the federal government has been too focused on fighting climate change, not enough on economic opportunities, like in the natural resources sector, where there are many? If climate policies are rolled back, reversed, canceled, and natural resources projects are put on the fast track, good or bad for Canada? 1-833-668-2577. That's our call-in line. If you've never called before, mention that, please. We'll make your call a priority. It's Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The environment and the economy. That's what we're talking about today. Balancing, protecting the environment with promoting economic growth. Has the federal government been too focused on things like fighting climate change? Maybe not focused enough on economic growth, especially in the natural resources sector. Climate policies are being rolled back in this country under Prime Minister Carney, and natural resources projects could be put on the fast track. Is that good or bad for Canada? Because environmentalists are going to say, this is terrible. Last year was a record year for insurance losses from extreme climate events. $8.3 billion Just last year, wildfire season this year, second worst on record. I mean, Calgary had a hailstorm, $3 billion in damages. Southern Ontario, flooding. BC hit by, atmospheric rivers all the time. They're going to say we can't be rolling these policies back. What do you think? 1-833-668-2577. Let's talk about the environment and the economy on Talkback today. Garth, Claresholm, Alberta. Garth, you're up first today on Talkback.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Garth.
First-time caller. Listen all the time. I love your show. So just be quick here.
Okay.
I don't think that they should be overly concerned about climate change. I think a bigger threat to Canadians is the United States getting their claws into us any further than they already have, and affecting our economy that way. The only way that we can alleviate that problem is to separate ourselves from our reliance on the United States through the development of our own natural resources. You want to do something about climate change? Our liquefied natural gas is so many more times cleaner than coal. Coal is still way too prevalent of an energy source on the planet today. We have the answer in Alberta with the liquefied natural gas. Let's develop that and help the world that way.
Okay. What about fighting climate change? Limiting global warming?
I'm
reducing
not a scientist, but I don't really
reducing our greenhouse gas emissions.
Reduce it. You get the world. There aren't any easy answers here, but replace all the coal with Alberta's liquefied natural gas. That's a 100% solid answer. Everybody else, these climate change, they're just guessing. They're just guessing if they think they've got a plan that's going to be more effective than that.
Do you think the last government was too heavily focused on fighting climate change?
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's a no-brainer. Yeah.
So if we're moving away from that, you think that'd be good for Canada? Moving a little bit more, more balanced?
Yeah,
maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because what's worse is our reliance on the United States. That's going to ruin our country again.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Garth. Thanks for listening and calling today. It's good to hear from you today. Ivor, also in Calgary today. Ivor.
It's Ivor. Thanks, Rob.
Ivor. Okay. Yep. Thank you
for
calling. Your opinion, please.
My opinion on climate change. I think not a lot of people know that the the environment obviously is important, but the carbon footprint that everybody always talks about, it's only 0.04% of the entire Earth's atmosphere. So what are we arguing about? What are we fighting about? It doesn't make any sense. The only reason I believe that the government is pushing this agenda is to scare us and to control us. And that's the only way they can stay in power. And it's pandering to people, and it doesn't make any sense. If you've ever looked at footage from California where they've got all those Teslas, there is kilometers of lineups to recharge your car. People are using generators in their trunks to keep their vehicles charged. So, I mean, I think it's a great idea. We're just not there yet. All the minerals that are mined to make those batteries. I mean, we're all guilty of it if you have a cell phone, but the thousands and thousands of pounds that it takes to build a battery, at the cost of most of it is slavery.
Yeah. Well, let me try and focus this here and focus on what's going on here in Canada. Okay. You're going to have an environmental movement in this country that is not going to be happy that, for example, the consumer carbon tax has been canceled, or that the EV sales mandate is being paused and quite likely canceled, or that clean fuel regulations are going to be redrawn and who knows, maybe canceled. And they're not going to be happy that we're going to be building more fossil fuel projects on the West Coast or doing more offshore oil drilling in Atlantic Canada. What do you think about that?
That's what we have to build on. That's what we've got.
That's what we have to do?
So many That's what we have to do. There are so many countries that are doing the same thing that are extremely, extremely rich. Saudi Arabia, they've got so many reserves. At one point, Venezuela was the richest country in South America, and because they were doing things right. They have so much oil and gas, and we should be up there as well. Our gas should be costing pennies per liter because we have so much of it. They basically used to give it away in Venezuela, and it's probably dirt cheap in Saudi Arabia. So
I wouldn't want to trade places with Venezuela right now, but I get your point, sir. You think we're missing out on tremendous economic opportunities, and fair enough, and you don't think much of the focus on climate change by the sounds of it. We'll stop here. We are underway. It's Talkback, 1-833-668-2577 on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Go to James in Halifax, get his thoughts on balancing the environment, protecting the environment while growing the economy. James, what's your opinion on our topic today?
Hi. Good day. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
Yeah,
sir.
as with so many things in life, I think patience and balance may be in order. This really is a classic. It's not either or. Two things. We can take our time and sort of go from today to nirvana over a few decades. It doesn't have to be tomorrow morning, so no one needs to worry about freezing in the dark. On the other hand, climate change, global warming is real. We've seen the much warmer summer temperatures. We've seen the wildfires. We've seen, et cetera. So anyone who has children or grandchildren and doesn't want to leave them, choking in the perpetual wildfire smoke would support taking action on this, but in a measured manner. So sure, maybe for example, I live in Nova Scotia. We are transitioning from producing most of our electricity 25 years ago from coal. Then we went to a lot of natural gas, and we now have 25% plus from hydro that comes in, hydroelectric that comes in from Newfoundland, Labrador to be precise.
Sure.
Clean, green, and what the major project that I believe Nova Scotia will be proposing for the list, the current list, is offshore wind turbines. We've already got a lot of onshore wind turbines. Bottom line, by 2030 or a couple of years after that, our grid will have gone from 100% fossil fuel 25 years ago to 95 at least percent green. So it can be done. And in other words, you can have environment and economy. All of this construction of pipeline, undersea cables and windmills and so on, and upgrading the grid, it's all good. It's jobs and it's green. So I'll stop my rant, but it's not either or. I would
like to ask you, what do you think about, if I could, some of the signature climate policies of the last government are being rolled back by this government? What do you think about that?
Electric vehicle mandate, ridiculous. So I'm glad it's being rolled back.
Okay. All right.
Too much too soon, and it required 100% tariff on Chinese cars because they're too cheap, and it required $10,000 a car subsidy, which luckily has ended. It all crashed and burned once, it became apparent that it was not wise to destroy our current auto industry to bring in cars from China produced, I don't want to exaggerate, state-subsidized automakers. And in the meantime, though, I support, let's go mine those critical minerals. I'm familiar with the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario. There are many other places in Canada, I believe, because we need them for batteries, and especially for electric vehicles eventually. But in the meantime, you need them for iPhones and whatever. So
that's right. Yeah.
I think
a lot of industrial uses. Many, and I'm not smart enough. But anyway, there's many industrial uses.
So we
Okay.
can, to some extent at least, have our cake and eat it too. So I encourage people to not panic in either direction.
Not panic. Okay. All right. I'm not panicking, but there is a shift, I think, happening on the policy front when it comes to the fight against climate change is important, but so is growing the economy and making the economy more resilient, as the new prime minister likes to say. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. We'll pick it up right after the latest breaking news, which is coming up next. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Talking about the environment and the economy and the apparent shift that is happening with the new government in Ottawa, whether you think the federal government's been too focused on fighting climate change, not focused enough on economic opportunities, especially in the natural resources sector. And if climate policies are rolled back, natural resources projects are put on the fast track, is that good or bad for Canada? Canadian government declared a climate emergency many years ago. Let's not forget that. 1-833-668-2577. Where are we going? James in Bow Island. James.
Hi, how you doing?
Very good, James. Thank you. What's your opinion here? Thank you.
Well, I definitely think that the weather is being modified. If you can quote Lyndon B. Johnson from a speech in 1962, he says, "Who controls the weather will control the world." And also there's a U.S. Air Force document written in 1996 called Owning the Weather in 2025, which I believe we are in. And there is a documentary I would really encourage everyone to watch. You can find it on YouTube. It's called Frankenskies, just like Frankenstein, but it's Frankenskies. I would really encourage people to educate themselves and watch that.
Okay, you're not really on the topic here. We have a government in Ottawa right now where there are 10 years of major environmental policies and laws put into place that some people think were stifling. Projects like natural resources projects, okay, that cost a lot of economic opportunity. Now we have this new government rolling back these policies, and it's coming up with a list 32 projects that it says are projects in the national interest, and a lot of them are natural resources projects. So things are kind of flipping here. Do you think that's good or bad for Canada?
I think that's good because the climate change is a hoax, I believe. So, yeah, I definitely think rolling back and putting the power back in the economy is what we need.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, you think climate change is a hoax. Many scientists would say the planet is warming more than ever and it's warming faster than ever. That's not really what I want to get into today. Whether you believe in climate change or not is not really what I want to debate today. It's whether it's good for the country. 1-833-668-2577. What's happening on the policy front? Because it's a very different tone. What we're hearing from Mr. Carney versus Mr. Trudeau. Abe in Champion, Alberta. Hello, Abe.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, Abe. What's on your mind?
I've got a few
What's your opinion here?
I've got a few points to make if I could. One is forest fires are not a climate event. They are a weather event. There's at least in most floors a foot of tinder on the bottom. You have oxygen, just elementary science. You have oxygen, you have the kindling temperature reach for fire, like, say, for example, a lightning strike, and things burn out of control. That's just with that. Now, the second thing that bothers me is Dr. Lee that you had on this morning. You know,
Professor Lee,
economists are from Carleton University. Economists are at best clairvoyants. I say that with complete respect.
He's not an economist.
On the radio, telling us on the radio that he can determine what the Prime Minister actually meant by what he said. That is just such nonsense.
Okay, I'm not sure what you mean. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that?
Well, he turned around. He said when Carney said this announcement or that announcement, what he actually meant is the banking industry is going to open up to the Americans. The marketing boards are gone. The Prime Minister said nothing of the sort. In fact, if you just want, my view is that as long as Quebec has got any say in Canada, we'll never get rid of marketing boards or all the protection that the part of the cheese and butter that's produced in Canada and distributed, distributed.
Okay, again, a little off the topic today.
Sorry, go ahead.
Right.
I haven't got a problem with that, Mr. Snow. That's fine.
Just Rob,
but the other thing I want to talk about is what Dr. Lee said was this. The superintendent of insurance of the state of New York, with 20 million people, has their banking system is worth $2.2 trillion. Canada has double that population, and our banking system is worth $8.8 trillion. Canada is strong. Canada is very strong. We're not going to bow to the Americans. We're not going to bow to the British. We're not going to bow to the French. We're going to have a reasonable deal out of this new trade deal that's coming. And I think we're going to have a really good trade deal. Again, I just want to say one other point.
All very interesting points, but again, not really on the topic today. And okay, carbon tax gone, EV sales mandate paused. A lot of people think it's also going to be gone. Clean fuel regulations, they say they're going to amend those. The clean fuel, what Mr. Poilievre was calling carbon tax 2.0. 32 projects. There's a list in the paper. These are all the projects. 14 of them are energy projects in Western Canada. At least 4 of them are related to natural resources. What do you think about these climate policies being rolled back and these other projects being put on the fast track? Don't you think that's a change in Ottawa?
Oh, I think it's a huge change. And
do you
I think
it's
good?
Do you think it's good? Okay, and why do you think it's fantastic?
It's because, first of all, I think climate change, it is happening, but it's very subtle. Number 2, weather events. People are always phoning in on shows and writing in and talking about misidentifying weather events and identifying them as climate change. There is climate change happening. I know it's real, but there's also, from when I was a kid, when we had 3 billion people in the world, we got now over 8 billion people. I mean, these are all factors in why the world's climate is changing slightly, and also the use of carbon fuels and so on. We don't manufacture. We just carbon. The world just changes carbon from one form to another, and there's too much in the air right now. And that's what we have to work at, is getting it out of the air and getting it back into a safe place so that the globe doesn't, the Earth itself doesn't warm up like it's warming up now. And we can handle that. But to have policies in Canada like that Trudeau did and making us suffer for what the whole world is responsible for, that's just nutty.
All right, Gotcha. Took a while to get you there, but I got you there. Thank you for sharing your opinion on the topic today. And I hope you will too. Lots of phone lines available today. Please join our discussion. So important. 1-833-668-2577, talking about our environment and our economy today. Balancing, protecting the environment while promoting economic growth. 1-833-668-2577 on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
So we've been talking about the environment and the economy, balancing the two. I want to play this clip of Justin Trudeau again. We'll play the longer clip. He had been, by this time, he'd been prime minister for about 2 years. Some of you may remember Justin Trudeau used to go across the country and hold town hall style meetings, greet the locals, take their questions, and he roll up the sleeves, take questions from ordinary Canadians. This is Peterborough, Ontario, winter of 2017, January 2017, and he's talking about the environment and the economy and how every decision we make about the economy has to take the environmental impact into account. And this clip became a well-known soundbite because he said, well, hold on, we can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow, but we need to phase them out. So let's play the longer clip of that.
It is a fundamental responsibility of any Canadian Prime Minister, and it's a historical responsibility, to get our resources to market. We are a country of resources, and we need to get those to market. But in the 21st century, getting our resources to market needs to be done not just by by diktat, but by doing it responsibly, sustainably, and including people in the process, both on consultations, including science, including Indigenous communities, in the way we move forward. I've said time and time again, and you're all tired of hearing me say it, you can't make a choice between what's good for the environment and what's good for the economy. We can't shut down the oil sands tomorrow. We need to phase them out. We need to manage the transition off of our dependence on fossil fuels. That is going to take time, and in the meantime, we have to manage that transition.
So some people heard that, and it confirmed everything they thought they knew about Justin Trudeau, there's Justin Trudeau, he's saying the quiet part out loud. He wants to phase out the oil sands. Now let's listen to what Mark Carney said yesterday. This was at actually last Friday at an event in Mississauga. And he's asked about his commitment to Trudeau-era climate policies. Because Mr. Carney killed the carbon tax. Mr. Carney's putting the EV sales mandate under review. Clean fuel regulations could be next. He's not talking too much about Canada meeting targets on greenhouse gas reductions. And his government might approve 2 LNG projects and 2 oil projects, a pipeline and an offshore oil project for Newfoundland. So he's asked, where do you stand on fighting climate change? Let's listen to that.
We're using this as an opportunity as part of a broader strategy on climate competitiveness to look at all our measures to help get greenhouse gases down, as I said a moment ago in French, greenhouse gases down in the key sectors, as well as across the economy. And we'll look at the interaction between the EV mandate, our clean fuel standards, our investment tax credits, our trade policy, all of those elements, because what this government is focused on is absolutely results. Not saying something's going to happen at a certain time, but giving workers and businesses the tools to make it happen.
See, that's very interesting, because what he's saying there is that everything is under review when it comes to environmental policies, because times have changed. Trump is in the White House. Tariffs are hurting the economy. Have to be more resilient. All of this stuff. What this government is focused on is absolute results, not saying something's going to happen at a certain time. 1-833-668-2577. David, up next on Talkback. Hi, David.
Hi.
Yeah, hi, David.
Hi, I've been listening to your program. I'm a first-time caller, so I'm pretty excited to jump on. Hey, I'm a conservative from Calgary, a long-term card-carrying member of the Conservative Party, and I'm supporting Mark Carney. And I'm kind of almost have to pinch myself when I say that, but you know, when he's talking in terms of, you know, making the economy the best of the G7 and all of the projects that he's going to be executing on, I think it's absolutely the right move. And the whole climate change, theory that Justin Trudeau and clan have been promoting for 10 years was absolutely wrong. So I think Carney's on the right step moving forward.
So if the pendulum is swinging back, you think that's a good step for Canada?
It's absolutely great step for Canada. We have the ability to be a leader in the world on many fronts. And I think that Mark Carney, if he executes on what he says he's going to do, now that's the caveat of my support. I think he's on the right track. And I'm shocked that I'm saying that, being a conservative from Calgary.
Okay, fair enough. What about the concerns in the environmental movement? Are you worried about those at all? That this is backsliding on the fight against climate change. Does that concern you at all, sir?
Not really. I mean, no. Well, I mean, as a Canadian, we're naturally inclined to be conscientious on the environment. I don't really know of any Canadian that's not conscientious on the environment. We know we don't need a government to tell us that. But the climate's been changing for years. I mean, you just go to the Rockies and you take a look at the glaciers.
they've been changing and melting and evolving for 80 million years. So, of course, the climate is changing, but it's not a Justin Trudeau phenomenon in the last 10 years. It's been going on for millions and millions of years.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Got to stop. Be right back with more of your calls at 1-833-668-2577 to join the discussion on Talkback today on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Talking about the environment and the economy today, whether the previous government was too focused on climate change and whether this is a good thing that some of these climate policies are being rolled back. And some projects are being put on the fast track, including perhaps a pipeline and an offshore oil project in Newfoundland and Labrador. What do you think? 1-833-668-2577. It's Talkback on News Radio. Adam in Charlottetown. Hello, Adam.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, Adam.
Thanks for taking my call.
Great pleasure today from Charlottetown. It's a great town.
I have a comment to make. Like your previous caller before the advertisement break was bang on, 100%. Right?
Okay.
He was bang on. Trudeau and Carney are completely different people. The only thing Trudeau done good for Canada was bring into Canada's legislation. As far as I'm concerned.
Legalizing marijuana. Okay. All right. Okay.
Right? That's the only thing that got him elected. He could stand up on podium, right? Because that's what his job was previously. Whereas Mark Carney, on the other hand, has held numerous jobs of being top-notch people, right? Bank of Canada, Bank of England. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So you have both. I'm not going to get into the topic about their education and why they're there, but I think that Mark Carney has a hell of a lot better skills than Justin Trudeau did all day long.
Okay.
Right?
But for example, I mean, where you are, I mean, you were hard hit by Fiona, for example, the hurricane, and some people might be concerned that we're rolling back policies that are supposed to be done in the name of fighting climate change. You're not concerned about? You're not concerned by that?
Yes, I am concerned about the environment. Of course, I am. But at the same time, we're only a drop in the bucket. You look at other countries like Russia, China, India, right? They're the big polluters. Why isn't the pressure being put on them? Right? So we have the skills. I was watching something the other night. There's a company at West that wants to, we're going to store our own nuclear waste. Right?
Right.
And we're going to store this in it's in Ontario. It's all good.
I think you're talking about Ignace. What's it? Yeah, in Ignace. Right?
Yeah. I just seen that the other night.
That's
so
right.
what happens now? Something, and they're going to have to truck it. Right.
That's right. 1,900 kilometers. I saw that report as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
well, there might be more of that. There might be more of that because the government wants to make big investments into nuclear power and small modular reactors.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
Is that good for the country?
Yes,
Do you think it's good for the country?
Well, it's a hell of a lot better than burning coal.
Okay. We'll wrap it up there for hour number 1. The latest breaking news coming up next. Talkback on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. We've been talking today about the environment and the economy, what's happening with the new government in Ottawa. And the seeming departure from the previous government, which was always accused of being too focused on the fight against climate change and not focused enough on growing the economy, and especially of stifling the natural resources sector in this country. Is that what you think is going on? And if climate, well, really, I mean, it's not even a matter of if climate policies are being rolled back. They are being rolled back, and natural resources projects could be put on the fast track. We're asking, do you think that's a positive development for Canada? Given what's happening in the United States, given what's happening around the world, 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Let's play this clip again from Friday. I'm really hung up on this today. And Mark Carney on Friday asked about how he's viewing climate change policies right now, given what his government has announced recently. Let's roll the tape there.
We're using this as an opportunity as part of a broader strategy on climate competitiveness to look at all our measures to help get greenhouse gases down, as I said a moment ago in French, greenhouse gases down in the key sectors, as well as across the economy. And we'll look at the interaction between the EV mandate, our clean fuel standards, our investment tax credits, our trade policy, all of those elements, because what this government is focused on is absolutely results. Not saying something's going to happen at a certain time, but giving workers and businesses the tools to make it happen.
Absolutely results. We're focused on absolutely results, not saying something's going to happen at a certain time. What could he be talking about? The case could be made. That's another example of the Prime Minister, this Prime Minister, Mark Carney, disowning, disavowing Justin Trudeau era policies, like the carbon tax, like the EV sales mandate, previously the digital sales tax, spending in the public sector. He says we're focused on results, not saying something's going to happen at a certain time. Like, we're going to cut greenhouse gas emissions 40 to 45% by the year 2030. That was the previous government's policy. Cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40 to 45% by the year 2030 and be net zero by 2050. Or that all electricity generation will be renewable by the year 2035. Despite critics who say, well, you know, Mr. Guilbeault, that's impossible from an engineering standpoint. No, we're going to do it anyway. Or all vehicle sales in Canada will be zero-emission vehicles in 10 years. Is that what he's talking about? The Carney government has this National Projects Office. It's going to be in Calgary, 2-year time frame to get these projects approved. 8 of them are mining projects. 14 of them are energy projects in Western Canada. 4 of the energy projects have to do with fossil fuels. 2 are LNG projects on the West Coast. Oil pipeline to the West Coast, Northern Alberta to Prince Rupert. And another one called Bay du Nord, which is oil and gas drilling in Newfoundland, offshore Newfoundland and Labrador. All potentially on the fast track. The environmental movement is going to say, but is that really the right thing to do when we are facing a climate emergency? The Canadian government under Mr. Trudeau passed a motion in the House of Commons. Canada is facing a climate emergency. The House of Commons voted for that and declared a climate emergency. It was very fashionable at the time to do that. The city council did the same thing in Calgary. Now there's a move to repeal that because in Calgary, municipal election is coming up. But it was all the rage for a while. Declare a climate emergency. We're going to declare a climate emergency. 650 municipal governments passed various resolutions saying, we are in a climate emergency. Toronto did it. City of Ottawa did it. Montreal, Calgary, as I said, Halifax, Victoria, Edmonton, Hamilton. And the same people who pushed for those declarations will say that climate emergency hasn't gone anywhere. It's still here. If anything, they will say the situation is as bad as ever. It's a climate crisis. It's a climate emergency. We can't ignore the climate emergency. The best thing we can do to contribute to solving the climate crisis would be to reduce our reliance on greenhouse gases. And they're going to say LNG won't do that. Oil pipelines won't do that. Offshore oil and gas won't do that. And we should have carbon taxes. And we should make EVs more affordable. And we should promote their use and encourage their use. We should even mandate their use. Because if we don't, the world is going to be even a hotter mess than it is now. And we can't be sacrificing the environment for the economy. I mean, that was pretty much the narrative during the Trudeau years. Now it seems we're about to go in a different direction. If that's the case, what do you think? Is that good or bad for Canada? 1-833-668-2577. It's hour number 2 of Talkback. Let's go to Steve in Calgary up next. Hi, Steve.
How you doing, Rob?
Very good, Steve. Thank you.
Hi, how you doing? I'm a member of the oh, goodness gracious.
All right, Steve, you collect yourself, and I'll be right back to you while you figure out what you're going to say. 1-833-668-2577. Just hang on, Steve. I'll be right back to you. And I'm going to stop here. Get some more calls on the line as well. Lots of phone lines available, folks. Wait won't be too long. This is Talkback, hour number 2 on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
All right, let's get to Steve and see if he's collected himself.
Hey,
Rob,
Hi,
Steve.
Hey, Rob. I finally got my head screwed on straight. Hey,
That's good.
Yeah, no, I'm a member of the Friends of Science Society. You go to friendsofscience.org. They do Climate Change 101. So, truthfully, I'm not against EVs because we have a finite resource that we're consuming at an incredible rate. So, it's actually going to be expelled over time. Probably 3 or 4 generations. We're going to be out of the fossil fuel survival, So now what? But so I'm not against that. But the only thing is, don't use CO2 as the cause of climate change. That is absolutely the most ridiculous thing that has ever existed. I mean, if you look at the sun and its activity and the changes to the sun's activity, it's in control of all the climate that we have. That's the end of the story. That's really what the Friends of Science will tell you that, and they got great presentations on their website that are worth looking at for sure.
Okay, but what I really want to get to is whether do you think the previous government, the Trudeau government, was too focused on the fight against climate change, environmental protection, if you will, and not focused enough on growing? You do, okay. So we see Carney's come along, he's rolling back some of these policies, and natural resources projects are part of this projects in the national interest list. What do you think of that development?
Well, I agree. Him rolling it back to me is just like you know what? So I looked at the Carney, the Bank of England governor. He's a member of the Fabian Society, and it's basically a one world order kind of concept. I mean, so if you go into that, I don't know if he was if the Bank of England current one is a member, I believe Carney is as well. And so it's small steps. Their whole philosophy control is small steps. Don't do big steps because you won't make any progress. So I believe that Carney's basically step back is basically just a rethinking about how big should this step be. Let's make it a smaller steps, and that changes everybody's thinking over time.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there then, Steve. Thank you. All right, bye-bye. Arsenault up next on Talkback. Arsenault. Am I saying that? Am I saying that right? Yeah, very good. Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'd just like to comment. I think the direction the previous government, Trudeau's government, was taking in regards to climate change, I believe that was the wrong direction, or at least it wasn't the wrong direction. It was the wrong magnitude.
Wrong magnitude. Okay, very interesting.
Yeah. So I think Carney rolling back some of those initiatives or goals. I think I agree with that. So I think climate change is an important thing in the world, and I do believe it is a real thing. But we also need to be competitive economically. The country, I'm from Calgary, so like our economy is based off of oil and gas, but so that doesn't mean we should just abandon oil and gas completely, but we should also have some focus into like the renewable energies and everything like that.
Sure, you want some diversification in your economy. You don't want to be a one company town kind of thing. I understand that. I understand that. But you think if the pendulum, I've described it this way, the pendulum is swinging back from a government that almost had an obsession with the fight against climate change. Now some of those policies are being rolled back, and we have, things like pipelines are back in the discussion. Offshore oil drilling back in the discussion. LNG, lots of talk about LNG and developing, export markets for our LNG. You think that's a positive development? Because environmentalists are not going to be happy with this,
Yeah, of course. Of course, environmentalists wouldn't be happy with it. But I think that there's a fine line. We have to be economically competitive as well on the global stage. So there's some sacrifices I feel like they have to be made to remain economically competitive as well.
All right, Arsenault, thank you. I'm glad we could fit your call in on Talkback today at 1-833-668-2577. Michael is up next. What's your opinion here on our topic today, Michael? Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, Michael.
Basically, I don't disagree with, as far as climate change is concerned, whether it be the Trudeau era or Carney. There's nothing wrong with the idea of it. The only thing that concerns me is that ever since they've been doing this in the early 80s and setting goals and whatnot, nowhere in Canada have they actually reached any of the goals that they proposed. All they do is they just keep saying, well, we're going to work on it, but they never get anywhere.
Yeah.
We're making the sacrifices which are costing us economically, etc. So, what I'm wondering is we're making all these sacrifices to make things better, but there's no evidence pointing that it's getting any better.
Right. So, for example, just as one example, the greenhouse gas emissions target. Okay, the Harper government had an emissions target to cut greenhouse gases, I think it was by 35%. Okay, by the year 2030. Mr. Guilbeault comes along and says, well, that's not good enough anymore, even though that government maintained that greenhouse gas emissions reduction target for the first few years that it was in office, didn't meet it, and then said, and now we're going to go even further and cut it by 40 to 45% by the year 2030, 5 years sooner. We're going to have a more aggressive target and try and meet it sooner. Your point is, well, what's the point of having these targets if you're never going to meet these targets anyway, right?
Well, that's exactly it. Because other factors like with the global warming, we do our best to improve things, but then we have more forest fires, which debunk all of the results because of all the carbon released from all the fire and whatnot. It skews all the results. So whatever we gain, we lose.
Yeah, that's why I find this quote from Mark Carney very interesting. We're going to focus on absolute results. We're not saying something's going to happen at a certain time. Not saying something's going to happen at a certain time. I think that's, maybe this is me putting words into the new prime minister's mouth, but I think that's kind of a direct assault on this idea that we're going to have these greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets and we're going to meet them absolutely by this year. He's suggesting, I think, that those days are over. 1-833-668-2577 on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Talking about the environment and the economy and the Carney government's seeming departure from the Trudeau government's climate change policies. and putting natural resources projects instead on the fast track, whether you think that's a good idea or a bad idea for Canada. 1-833-668-2577 to Will up next on Talkback. Thanks for calling, Will. You're on the line. What's your opinion today?
Well, it's a pretty divisive and polarizing issue, and I think we got to look at some of the facts. I mean, we all care about the environment, but it's not just the people that want oil and gas just care about money, and the environmentalists, they just care about the world. It's pretty complex. There was a documentary released, it's very well done, by Michael Moore. It was kind of torn down on YouTube, but it is free and everyone should watch it. It's called Planet of the Humans, and it talks about biomass and these buzzwords and this green energy. There's nothing green about it. EV lithium batteries, the mining for coal, the emissions themselves, solar panels, coal, like it's 6 in one, half a dozen in the other. You look at the carbon emissions from Canada, the UK, what are we at? 0.08, 2%. There are certainly violating countries that aren't us, but we're getting the black eye on it all. And some of these environmentalists ask them when it's minus 40 not to turn their furnace on, like it's a pipe dream. Pardon the pun, but these guys get on their private jets and invest in this green energy, and then they make laws that line their pockets, and they look like the good guy because they care about the world. There's a lot more going on here, and I think it's high time we kind of, look at these companies that are at the forefront of energy production and look at ways to be responsible without lying to ourselves. So I really hope people hear this and watch Planet of the Humans. It's really well done, and it's evidence-based.
Yeah, this is like the documentary recommendation day today here on Talkback. But look, Mr. Carney was an ardent supporter of carbon taxes for many years. First order of business, he becomes prime minister, he cancels the carbon tax. Okay? Now he's put this EV sales mandate under review. He has said the government's going to amend the clean fuel regulations. Go back and take another look at that. And then Friday said, well, actually, when it comes to our environmental policies, pretty much everything is under review. At the same time, you have a newspaper gets its hand on the list of projects that everybody wants to see. There's 32 of them, and quite a few of them are energy projects, LNG, oil pipeline, offshore oil and gas drilling. Is this good for Canada? Lots of mining projects?
Sure, but in a way, it's a politician with lip service looking to maybe capture some votes where it's not such a close race and not look like, the totalitarian regime that preceded him. That didn't work, and saying there's no set data, no real rubric or matrix here. That's certainly convenient, isn't it? There's no measuring stick. So, I mean, I take that with a grain of salt.
Take it with a grain of salt. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. 1-833-668-2577. And have your say today on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
I think what I'm hearing from some of the listeners today on this topic, the environment and the economy, balancing the two, whether under the previous government it was just way too focused on the fight against climate change versus growing the economy, exploiting the abundance of natural resources that we have in this country to generate jobs, generate wealth in the country. I think what I'm hearing from the listeners is there's a certain amount of, trepidation, doubt, even suspicion that Mr. Carney is serious about wanting to move ahead with, for example, these projects in the national interest, or when they hear Mr. Carney say, we want to make Canada an energy superpower, both a renewable energy superpower and a conventional energy superpower, even though when they're in Europe, they're talking about exploiting the European markets for Canadian LNG. And we have this, list of 32 projects that are, supposed to be making the rounds of Ottawa. 8 of them are mining projects. 14 are energy projects. 4 of them having to do with fossil fuels with these 2 LNG projects on the West Coast. Oil pipeline to the West Coast, what they're calling Northern Gateway 2.0. Offshore oil for Newfoundland and Labrador with Bay du Nord. All of these are potentially on the fast track. I think there's some I don't know, suspicion about whether Mark Carney really believes this or whether he's going to follow through. And maybe that's understandable, just given, the prime minister's background, his ardent support of things like carbon taxes in the past, and saying, Canada was a model for carbon taxes, and other countries around the world should do what Canada is doing when it comes to putting a price on carbon. There's that famous clip of Pierre Poilievre and Mr. Carney long before he was prime minister, sparring over whether the very first Northern Gateway pipeline should have even been built, and Mr. Carney was opposed to that project, and now all of a sudden he's the prime minister, and not only is there Northern Gateway 1, it could be Northern Gateway 2. So I understand that. I understand that, and he was, of course, the UN climate envoy. So maybe some people are just saying, well, the proof will be in the pudding. Let's you pull out your cliche. Let's wait for the rubber to hit the road here, and whether shovels do actually get in the ground. And maybe if we hadn't had 10 years of Liberal government with Mark Carney kind of in the background, maybe we would be a lot further ahead on advancing some of these projects. I would point out, and we have lines available, 1-833-668-2577. It's not just Mark Carney who is sounding as though it is time to get on with these projects, especially natural resources projects. We have premiers who are saying the same thing. I mean, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith, of course, that's a given. She has long had her list of policies that she would like to see the federal government get rid of. The Nasty Nine, I think she calls it. You have C-69. No more pipelines bill. How long has she been calling for that to be scrapped? Since the day she became premier, probably even before that. Clean electricity regulations. The oil and gas emissions cap. What she calls a production cap. Federal methane regulations. The just transition legislation. The clean fuel regulations that are now, according to Mr. Carney, as recently as just a few days ago, are going back to the drawing board. The plastics ban, and some others that don't really have to do with natural resources. But it's not just Danielle Smith who has been talking about these things. It's Doug Ford in Ontario as well. He passed his own legislation through the provincial legislature in Ontario, which is much like the legislation at the federal level. I guess you could call it projects in Ontario's interest. And, the big one in Ontario is the Ring of Fire, where there has been so much talk for so many years and multiple governments now about the Ring of Fire in Northern Ontario, but just little to no action on moving ahead with a project that could just tap into enormous wealth. But of course, there are major challenges with the Ring of Fire. One is the location. It's 500 kilometers north of Thunder Bay, like it's hit Thunder Bay and, keep on going. And there's no road. Despite pledges to build one, there's no road. And still no funding for a road. In fact, beyond roads, there's no infrastructure at all. There's no electricity. Someone in the mining sector described the Ring of Fire to me many years ago as trying to open a mine on the dark side of the moon. I mean, there is nothing there. Everything has to be built. You're starting from scratch, but I mean, it's an area of enormous potential. Chromite, one of the largest chromite deposits in the world. Nickel, copper, cobalt, gold, zinc, platinum, all up there. But the big question is, well, yeah, it's up there, but how do you get it out of there? Especially, how do you get it out of there if you have a government that has an obsession with fighting climate change? And the question today is, are those days finally over? It was certainly a hallmark of the previous Liberal government, but can you really say that now? 1-833-668-2577. It's Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
As I mentioned, when you look across the country, it's not just at the federal level where there seems to be a new tone on moving ahead with natural resources projects. I mentioned, that this is a slam dunk always in Alberta, where they have high hopes for various projects, even carbon capture and storage among them. And Doug Ford, Bill C5, special economic zones, wants the Ring of Fire, put on the fast track, and certainly, on the list of 32 projects that are in the national interest. But even in places where you wouldn't expect this sort of stuff to be even on the radar, like a province like Quebec, where governments are usually openly hostile to any suggestion of developing, say, a fossil fuel project. I would put it to you, even there's been some softening. Not much, but some. You have Francois Legault, the premier, has said, and this is a theme with all of these premiers, look, the world has changed. The world has changed because of Trump. And we should be developing more Canadian energy. And we shouldn't have to rely, in Quebec's case, on imported American energy. And despite what you hear from the political class in that province, there is actually public support for a project like the Energy East Pipeline that was supposed to go from northern Alberta, snake its way all across Canada, and eventually end up in St. John, New Brunswick in the big Irving refinery there. Open hostility to that when it was, being proposed in Quebec. Not so much anymore. Even LNG. There was a massive LNG project that was in the works in Quebec for years and years and years, like a $14 billion LNG project in an area of Quebec where historically has been double-digit unemployment. It was backed by Warren Buffett. It was called Energy Saguenay. But it was canceled. Once more, same old Canadian story because of opposition from some Indigenous communities and almost every environmental group, not just in Quebec, but all across the country. But now there seems to be more support for projects like that. The big unknown in that province is that there's going to be an election in Quebec next year. So everything is kind of up in the air. And the frontrunners to win the election, the Parti Québécois, they are hardcore environmentalists in the Parti Québécois. In Nova Scotia, where you have a progressive conservative government, Premier Houston has talked about wanting to do more natural resources projects in his province. And there's a lot of pushback to some of the plans there from that government, whether that's fracking for gas, which is always controversial, whether that's doing more with the offshore oil and gas industry off the coast of Nova Scotia. Uranium is a very controversial topic in the news all the time in Nova Scotia. But like we're hearing from other premiers, like we're hearing from the Prime Minister, Premier Houston is also saying the world has changed. And everything that has happened in the last year or so has to serve as a wake-up call. And Premier Houston has said, we just aren't in the position to be saying no all the time. We can't always have moratoriums. He said, and here's another angle, Nova Scotia needs the money. And that's not a Nova Scotia thing, that's a Canada thing. The population is aging. Healthcare costs are through the roof and only going to go higher. Premier Houston kept saying Nova Scotia shouldn't have to send workers out west all the time to find good jobs. The people in Nova Scotia should have the ability to get those jobs in Nova Scotia. And there's all the talk about equalization and frustration in the West about never-ending equalization payments some provinces that are have-not provinces forever, while Alberta is always a have province and never really gets anything from equalization. And Premier Houston has been saying, wouldn't it be better off if Nova Scotia was just a have province instead of a chronic have-not province? All of this is a change from the Trudeau years, federally and provincially. It's a change with many provincial governments as well, a change in tone. The Liberals in Ontario governed for 15 years. They did not endorse enthusiastically the Energy East pipeline in any meaningful way. If anything, they spoke begrudgingly about it. In Quebec, some of you may remember the mayor of Montreal at the time, Denis Coderre, celebrating, actually danced in the streets at news that Energy East was being suspended by the developer, TC Energy at the time, TransCanada. And in Nova Scotia, Stephen McNeil, the former premier there, the Liberal, they loved banning things. Banned fracking for gas, offshore oil exploration in Georges Bank. So now that's another provincial government where they're rethinking the wisdom of a lot of these policies. And it's another provincial government that is going to face the wrath of the environmental movement because they're going to say, what the heck about the climate crisis? Whatever happened to that? I'm Rob Snow. This is Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Let me remind you about listening to the podcast of the show, Now You Know with Rob Snow. You should download the Seeker app. Help you hear our show when you want to. Listen live, listen to the podcast. Seeker spelled Seekr. Lots of exclusive content that you won't hear anywhere else. News, music, and sports. You can download it for iOS or Android. Seeker, spelled Seekr. And Now You Know with Rob Snow on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, one of the reasons why there may be this departure for the new government, away from being so heavily focused on policies and enacting legislation to fight climate change, is because of what's happening with the economy. There's an old line in politics, it's the economy stupid. And if it's the economy stupid at any other time, this is a government that would be in trouble because the economy's not doing great. We've reported over the last 2 weeks about clear evidence of a Canadian economy that is weakening. I mean, just this past Friday, we had the jobs report, 66,000 job losses, unemployment rate 7.1%. And I mean, in some of the big cities, it's even more than that. The unemployment rate in the biggest city in Toronto is it's almost 9%. And now we have this situation where more people who find themselves unemployed or they're unemployed for longer than they used to be. And all the evidence points to a labor market that is on the soft side, and finding a good job is becoming harder and harder to do. And of course, it was one of the worst summers ever for young people looking for summer jobs. That came out just this past Friday. And the week before that, you had the GDP report that showed the economy contracted in the most recent quarter, which was the second quarter. Now we're well into the third quarter. Not really much has changed. And if the current quarter is anything like the last quarter, the Canadian economy will be in a recession. So sure, in this environment, why would you be focused on fighting climate change when, if you're the prime minister, your real focus should be on the economy? Because, it's the economy, stupid. But we are going to follow up on this. We have some great interviews lined up for tomorrow. Avi Lewis is going to join us. Now, there have been rumors and even a report in the Toronto Star that Avi Lewis is going to run to be the next leader of Canada's NDP. He hasn't confirmed that one way or another, but Avi Lewis is, He wrote the LEAP Manifesto. Some of you may remember that from 2015, very controversial at the time, and a very hardcore policy document on the fight against climate change and what he thought the Canadian economy should look like. And it doesn't resemble the kind of economy that Prime Minister Carney is touting right now. Abby Lewis's father was the leader of the NDP in Ontario, and his grandfather helped to create, along with Tommy Douglas, the federal New Democrats out of the CCF. So we're looking forward to that. And as well, how do people in the environmental movement feel about some of these policy announcements from Mark Carney? Adam Thorne is going to be with me tomorrow. He's with the Pembina Institute. And Dale Béguin is with the Canadian Climate Institute, focusing on environmental policy and economics. So this is just the start of the discussion, not the end of the discussion. We pick it up tomorrow. Brand new topic, though, for Talkback tomorrow. I'm Rob Snow. Thanks for listening today. More of your phone calls tomorrow. And always the latest breaking news on News Radio